I wasn't sure about it, so I didn't publish the study. That's the truth I have to tell you about the Imperial College COVID 19 response team's March 16th, 2020 report titled Impact of Non Pharmaceutical Interventions to Reduce COVID 19 Mortality and Healthcare Demand. That doesn't mean the report was bad by any means. It just means I wanted to confirm some information before I published it for my audience. It also doesn't mean I haven't used it as a reference in other published articles after confirming the referenced information. You can understand why if you just glance at the first figure in the report. The study predicts 2.2 million deaths in the United States, and that is accurate. But what a lot of folks have missed in the study is that this is for an unmitigated epidemic of COVID 19 in the United States. If you take the time to look, the study also highlights various mitigation steps applied to the critical care unit or ICU bed availability. This study clearly shows the flattening of the curve when various mitigation strategies are applied, but also shows even the flattest curve still significantly exceeds our ICU bed surge capacity. Why is all this important now? Because a lot of folks with big voices are now saying this model is being used by decision makers in the US, and I believe it is, and that it has been, and that the current statistics in the model show the report was wildly inaccurate. I think they're seeing this model from too narrow of a focus and not from the big picture progressing over time. While the Imperial study report is based on a modified existing model at the time, that doesn't mean it wasn't useful. In fact, if I were making decisions and it's all I had, it would be a useful tool to use, especially if it's all I had. Of course, now, as opposed to even 10 days ago, the US has finally conducted enough testing to produce increasingly more reliable data decision makers can use. We also know a lot more about the virus. These two facts and the data associated with them should be considered very carefully going forward in this pandemic response. The situation is very fluid even as I speak, but two things can now be true at the same time: opening most of the economy up around the country and that stronger mitigation measures need to be applied. The data now give us that ability. There are 2, maybe 3 to 5 cities and metropolitan areas that need more restrictive measures in order to keep dampening the pandemic spread to the rest of the country. I've highlighted 2 of the cities before: New York City and New Orleans, just 35 miles south of me. But it looks like we can now add Los Angeles. When we look at the current measures and compare them to the model, we see the cities are taking the mitigation measures recommended. Hospitalizations with symptoms continue to increase sharply every day, and in Louisiana's case, where I live, will likely exceed hospital capacity by early April if more resources aren't allocated to the New Orleans metropolitan area. This is an evolving situation, but local authorities are focused on the issues, however. We, as a nation, need to get more focused on these particular areas. What more measures can be taken by federal, state, and local authorities? Number 1, establish containment zones around these cities and the appropriate metro areas. Number 2, stop all non-essential travel into and out of the zones, including air, land, and sea. Number 3, focus medical logistics at these zones, increased hospital capacity, ventilators, devices, human resources, and personal protective equipment, or PPE. And finally, decontaminate travel facilities in heavily populated areas like the French Quarter. I know some are going to say we're already doing this or that, but we're not. Where I live, many people work in New Orleans, even though, as I said, our home is 35 miles north of the city and metropolitan area that is definitely a hot zone. Those workers, even if essential, shouldn't be traveling back and forth every day. In a containment, those essential workers need to be housed within the zone, not potentially bringing the virus out every single day. Getting back to the Imperial College study, the most useful portions, now that we know more, are the strategies to mitigate or suppress the epidemic. It is time to further suppress some areas now, like New Orleans, and open the relief valve on the rest of the country as soon as possible while maintaining social distancing precautions even after opening those businesses again. Today, Mr. Chance Wilson is our guest once again, this time from New York City, where he lives, to update us on what is happening on the ground there. Well, welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. My friend Chance Wilson, CEO of WGI Global International, and we are with him, and he's coming to us from New York City in Manhattan, where he lives. Chance, how are you holding up in this pandemic response?
Well, Rob, it's pretty surreal. I'm here in the middle of it, and I also, like everyone else in the country, keeping up with the news, and I just don't think the news does the significance of this justice. I'm in Hell's Kitchen in Manhattan. I look out the window, 9th Avenue, a major road right outside my window, empty, and that's normally never the case. The streets are empty. The only sounds I really hear are ambulances and firefighters passing by. And I don't say that to be dramatic. In fact, I was woken up today by what sounded like 2 or 3 ambulances passing by. The New York Presbyterian Hospital is just a few blocks from me, so that explains that back and forth. They're coming to and from that major hospital. It's a ghost town in Manhattan. I mean, aside from a few locals and tourists on the street, it's mostly just homeless people that are passing by. When I go out once a day for fresh air, and that's really all I see. All the major landmarks, Times Square, empty. It's remarkable. It's like something out of a movie. We have tens of thousands infected here in New York City, hundreds dead, and those numbers are rising. Our hospitals are reaching capacity, and as a matter of fact, I'm told the morgue here is nearly at capacity as well. So pretty soon there won't be space to put the deceased, according to that report. So it's a truly, Governor Cuomo, who has done an excellent job. He goes on every day and he tries to stress the seriousness of the situation, and he's right. Some people call him dramatic. Some people think he's exaggerating. He's not. This is incredibly serious, and we have to take more action, or I fear it'll get worse.
Yeah. So you mentioned the morgue. They are at capacity. That's some of the reports that we're seeing here. But honestly, there are some in the media and social media that are downplaying that. And they're also downplaying the hospitals being at capacity, even though it's been pretty consistent out of the governors of New York and New Orleans and Louisiana. And the president's team, that hospital capacity is really one of the biggest reasons why we're trying to slow the spread down of this virus so that we don't overcome those and put ourselves in a bad position, like having to make do not resuscitate decisions due to a lack of ventilator equipment, those kind of things. Are you seeing logistical vehicles on the streets? The governor of New York is reporting that equipment, medical devices like ventilators and personal protective equipment, PPE, are getting to his hospitals now. But I really haven't heard from the mayor of New York City yet in that regard. Are you seeing any activity like that?
So I've seen Army Corps of Engineer trucks. There's the JATVIS Center, which is not far from me, which the governor has designated into a hospital. So I've seen Army Corps of Engineer trucks going back and forth towards that. Can you hear that? That's an ambulance going by.
I do hear that, yeah.
So that's just regular. That's a pretty common sound. So obviously the ambulances, fire trucks, pretty heavy NYPD presence, more than I've ever seen. It's so I will say, the government response here has been very strong. They're very present, and they're very active, which is a good thing. They're taking the situation seriously. but a lot of Army Corps of Engineer for sure, police, firefighters, paramedics, pretty present.
That's good to hear. As you may not know, that I've been advocating for a stronger containment around New York City and New Orleans for about a week now. Now that we've got testing data to show, because we're talking about reopening parts of the economy around the country, and we should be looking at that, getting businesses back up, so we don't have to do these $2 trillion spending bills that the House is about to vote on all the time, and get people back to work that we can. But we're also getting reports that people are leaving New York City, and national announcements are going on that you need to quarantine yourself for 14 days if you've recently been in New York City. I would advise the same thing for folks that have been in New Orleans. They need to sequester themselves or quarantine themselves for 14 days if they've been in New Orleans recently, because, you know, it's still climbing there is what it looks like. And we know that now because we've had enough mass testing to be able to see that. And the deaths are still going up too. So do you think that the area is being contained well enough? Or, you know, I don't think anybody should be going in or out by land, sea, or
Yeah,
air.
I agree.
What do you think?
I agree. I think the scary thing in this situation is I could get on a plane right now to Wyoming or somewhere with a low, reported cases, and I don't, if I have it, let's say I have it, I could spread it around. Coming from New York City, a major epicenter, I could just get on a plane or get on a train or drive somewhere right now, and potentially spread that around. There's nothing stopping anyone here from leaving and going anywhere. So I think, definitely grounding the flights out of LaGuardia, Newark, and JFK, stopping the Amtrak and the trains for a week or two. I think those are pretty critical steps because obviously we have a good response here, and it's doing what it can for New York. But as long as people can come in here and as long as people can leave, I feel that's counterproductive, right? Because the solutions are working for New York City, but if people potentially who are infected can still come here, and people who have it can still leave here and potentially go elsewhere and spread it, I don't see how that's effective. So I agree with you. I think shut down the airports and the trains for a few weeks and really keep New York contained. I think that'll be and other hotspots, right?
Yeah.
I think doing that is really necessary at this point.
Yeah, it looks like New York City, New Orleans, and Louisiana is the big driver in the South, and Los Angeles is emerging as the big hot zone out west at this point. The Seattle area, where the initial outbreak was, has about 100 deaths now. Is fairly contained, but they ought to be looking at making sure that folks are not moving around out of that area until we get the spread under control and get those cities really back to good health and are able to take care of them. And that would enable the federal, state, and local authorities to really focus their medical logistics at those areas instead of trying to do a peanut butter spread around the country, because we have limited numbers of respirators or ventilators, especially, and obviously the PPE is being manufactured again in the United States. Factories like the Microla factory has been converted to manufacture masks. Those are all good things. It's a great sign for America. I think see business coming.
Oh yeah, I agree. I think I think to see a lot of these companies stepping up, right, and trying to serve their communities and in the country. I think this is, President Trump has made the analogy that he is a wartime president. And I think in this sense, this is a war, right? And as we saw, just as a student of history, just as we saw during the Second World War, how industry and society joined together and mobilized the resources to fight the Nazis and the Japanese, right? We're going to have to, mobilize the resources and come together to fight this virus and stop the spread of it. So I think to see that, definitely is reminiscent of past efforts like that. And I think it's really important it continues and it grows. And, um, you know, more companies step up. And obviously, from a civilian perspective, we all have to follow the health guidelines and socially distance ourselves is key.
You mentioned the homeless you're seeing on the streets. Is the city of New York not doing something actively to address that? The New Orleans city government is addressing it. They're moving them all into shelter buildings and giving them a place to stay until this is over, so they can A, you know, get them out of off the street, but B, also, if they do get sick, they're right there at medical care and don't have to wonder where to go and those kind of things. Is New York City doing anything like that?
Not at a large enough level, Rob. I think the homeless issue in New York is probably my biggest criticism of our city. We have about 60,000 homeless people here as the last report, last number I saw. The issue is, as I mentioned, I mean, um, aside from some locals and some tourists, the few that are out there, it's mostly homeless people on the sidewalks and on the streets, obviously because they have nowhere else to go. And the danger of that is obviously that they're walking around the city, they're touching things, going into buildings, going into subways. A number of them could have the coronavirus and be spreading it unintentionally, right? Because they're obviously the hygiene conditions for a homeless person are pretty low, and I don't say that to be crass, I'm just being honest. So, keeping that in mind, and then the fact that there's this virus going around, a number of these homeless New Yorkers could be spreading this around the city, and so I think that's a huge health crisis. I think New York should be doing what New Orleans is doing. I think we need to just like we kind of the governor declared the Jappas Center a permanent, not a permanent, but a temporary hospital. I think find some temporary housing for the homeless residents. I mean, we have entire hotel skyscrapers in the city are empty. All the Hiltons and Marriott's and etc. are pretty much closed. So put some of these homeless people in these hotels, right? They'll have a bed, they'll have a shower, get them cleaned up, keep them there, and then obviously at a larger level as this dies down, right? Don't put them back on the street. Plug them into mental health programs, rehab, job training, etc. But right now, at a large level, they're just being left on the streets. And I think that's dangerous. I
That's
think it's very dangerous.
very surprising that a socialist like the current mayor of New York City would not be rounding folks up as much as possible and trying to take care of them. But we can always pray and hope that they're working on it. And I would guess that there probably are, just that we're not aware of it. But they need to move faster, and all of these cities need to do that and get these folks contained and get this virus contained in their areas, and most importantly, get the medical resources focused on them, especially New York City and New Orleans and Los Angeles, so that we're not depriving them of the adequate resources they need. And I believe all that machinery is in progress, but there's still too much focus on the country as a whole and not enough on the hot zones, in my opinion. But let's talk about how you're doing, if you don't mind sharing, Chance. Mentally, physically, is this taking a toll on you?
Oh, it's a marathon. It's a marathon, Rob. To be honest with you, I think it's very. I've been working in New York City since December 2018. So, I've seen the city, in a normal state, and the hustle and bustle of New York City is what we all love. I'd recommend you and your listeners, or your viewers, go listen to a song called Empire State of Mind by Jay-Z and Alicia Keys. Both those people are from New York City, and it's kind of their anthem to New York. And you listen to that, it talks about the hustle and bustle of New York and chasing dreams and all those remarkable things that we all love about the city. You don't see that right now, obviously due to the current situation. There is the hustle and bustle isn't there. Everyone's at home. That energy, that dynamism of New York, that feeling that you can come here and conquer all your dreams is not present right now, and that's shocking. That's really shocking. And walking through Times Square is one of my favorite places just to all the billboards and the lights, and you go there and you go there and you dream big. You dream of being maybe on one of those billboards one day, and to see that place empty, it's just it's tremendous. It's tremendously heartbreaking. But this is I always say New York City is a mini version of America. All the great things about America is present right here in New York, and so New York always bounces back. Like I said in our last interview, after 9/11, New York bounced back. After Hurricane Sandy, New York bounced back. So I think all those things we love about the city will come back. It's just a matter of time. It's not even if, it's when. But until then, it's pretty hard to see New York like this. I'll be honest.
Well, it sounds like at least most folks are focused on the mission, which is to social distance and help stop the spread of this virus. Hopefully, the authorities will take it more seriously in these hot zones that we've talked about, Chance. And I wish you well. We'll get together again next week if you're able to do that for an updated report from New York City and Manhattan. And we appreciate you having you on the Rob Maness Show.
Of course, anytime. Look forward to chatting again next week.
All right. And take care of yourself. God bless.
Thank you.